Living Beyond 120 is provided for informational purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. This content is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of a physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. This is Living Beyond 120, the podcast about longevity, health, and human performance, with hosts Mark Young.
We're not talking about how to live to be 120 and be old for a long time. We want to change lifespans. 60 years old isn't looking at retirement. 60 years old is looking at what's the next challenge.
And Dr. Jeffrey Gladden, physician, interventional cardiologist, and longevity expert.
What would you do if you had an extra 40 or 50 or 60 years of health span? What would you do with that time?
Now, this week's episode of Living Beyond 120.
Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Living Beyond 120. I'm your host, Mark Young, with my co-host and partner, Dr. Jeffrey Gladden. Jeff, what's cooking, buddy?
Oh, everything's cooking. It's pretty warm down here in Texas. I know barbecue's cooking.
You're a big barbecue fan, too. Barbecue and longevity just go hand in hand, don't they?
Yeah. There's a lot of things cooking down here. Apex is pushing into some new territories, which we're really excited about. A bunch of new genetic testing and being able to help optimize people age measurements, if you will, biological age measurements. And then also some of the longevity pieces we're pushing on, we're getting some nice results with. So super excited about all that.
I just got some of the NutriZoomer test results in.
Good. Yeah, we'll have to run through all that.
Started looking at them. Looks like I've got some work to do on my brain.
Okay. Yeah. And that's a fascinating thing. We're able to link the gut, the food, the brain, the immune system together now for the first time with some infectious agents also. So it's pretty enlightening to kind of see what's going on, because you can't really take action on things until you know what it is you're dealing with. So it's all about higher levels of precision. So we're really excited about all that.
I seem to have some acetylcholine issues going on.
Okay. Well, acetylcholine's you've looked at your stuff. I haven't looked at your stuff yet, but acetylcholine's a major neurotransmitter.
Mm-hmm. So. Absolutely. So, Jeff, I'm on the fast mimicking diet right now.
Okay. And I think I'm the instigator of that. So that's why when you started talking about cooking, I immediately went to food just to kind of see how that would sit with you.
So I am on day 2 of a 5-day fast where I am living on protein bars that are the size of what would you call that? One of those little candies that you might
the size of a Twix?
No, they're not the size of a Twix.
Okay.
They're the size of like one candy that you would find in a box of See's candies or something.
Oh, okay.
And a variety of very watery soup. This is a very plant-based diet. There's almost no protein in this, isn't there?
No, there's very little protein, but it's actually designed to enable you to actually consume some calories without breaking the fast, if you will, so that your body gets the benefit of fasting with you not having to abstain from food 100%. So,
what is with these people in olives? Why is there olives in everything? Well,
fat is a good, kind of slow release. It's not going to spike your blood sugar. It's going to kind of keep the machinery moving. But typically in a resting state, and they encourage you not to exercise, you're burning more fat than anything else. The mitochondrial testing we do shows that there's a spectrum of that for people, but people will go up to 100% fat burning at rest. So, and even people with weaker mitochondria will be at 70%.
Now, on today's show, we have a friend coming back, Alex Tavarnes coming back, and he's our resident expert on molecular hydrogen. But while we're still in the fast thing, Alex might want to, because he has some fasting experience too. What is this doing for me?
Well, it's doing a few things depending on what angle you're looking at. I mean, it's activating, autophagy, which of course we need, and discoveries on autophagy, won a Nobel Prize a few years back.
Autophagy, just so the audience is familiar, autophagy is basically the process of your cells kind of cleaning themselves out. It's a little bit of spring cleaning, recycling, going through, taking out the trash, and It's a way to make your cells actually younger and kind of work better. It's like a tune-up for your cells.
Now, am I getting rid of maybe defective cells, cancerous cells? What am I getting rid of?
Yeah. Sorry.
Well, that's okay. No, I mean, you're getting rid of a lot of things inside the cell, and then there's also a purge going on in terms of getting rid of senescent cells and things like that as well. So it's kind of a total body cleanse, if you will.
Now, does this work for something like insulin resistance also?
It could. Fasting could. I mean, there's a lot of thoughts going on that insulin resistance isn't actually resistance to insulin. It's that your cells are too jam-packed with glucose, right? So you're helping clear out your cells. I know there was one analogy I heard that it's like insulin is ordering, it's like your wife ordering you to put a shirt in a suitcase, and when the suitcase is empty, it's easy, you can put a shirt. But all of a sudden the suitcase is full and, your wife tells you to put a shirt in the suitcase and you ignore her, right? And then we need more insulin and it's like your wife's screaming at you, so you're trying to jam pack it full, right? So the resistance could be not that your insulin isn't working, it's that the cell has too much glucose in. So fasting.
It's a good analogy, actually.
So these 5 days of being on, and I'm basically consuming like 800 calories a day of very specific plant-based food, right?
It was very low carbohydrate content.
I'm pretty close to what the FMD is, my day before a water fast and my day after, and what I often like doing, especially say I break a fast in the morning, I just slowly snack and I eat 500-600 calories over the first 8 hours. Because when you break a fast, breaking a fast is almost as important as the fast itself, right? If you load yourself full of tons of carbs, tons of sugar, you're going to get high for one, but two, you're going to be throwing your body through a ringer, and it's going to throw your digestive system through a ringer by loading up too much food. So I'll often eat, you said they love olives. I'll eat just some light hummus with some Kalamata olives and some, whole grain, like flatbread, just to get a little bit of carbs into me, and slowly eat, maybe 600 calories over that for the first 8 hours. But I up my activity during that time. And by the time I end up eating a bigger meal, I'm usually still in ketosis, and my blood sugar is still like in a fasting level, maybe about 4.6 millimolars. But then my digestive system is activated, and I can have a little bit more of a meal of substance without making myself sick.
So Jeff, somebody like me, so I work out with weights a lot. I take in a lot of protein. I know we don't always agree on that. By giving my body these 5 days without any animal protein, what else is going on? Am I giving it a rest? Am I just allowing the digestive system to have a break? What am I doing?
It's really, I can think of it almost as a total body reset. So, you're giving your digestive tract a break. We use it as a way to help heal leaky gut.
Interesting.
Yeah, it can actually kind of reboot the health of the gut. It also has been shown to boost stem cell activity. Not only is autophagy increased, but stem cell activity is increased. And, Alex has a routine where he fasts about 48 hours a week and then 72 hours once a month, and twice a year he does a 5-day fast. The fast mimicking diet is designed to be done on a monthly basis, 3 months in a row, 5 days. And the data that they show is that there's a significant boost in stem cell activity. It's transient, it doesn't go on forever, but it's sort of, you can think of your longevity genes as being activated when you're in calorie deprivation. We know that it raises NAD, we know that it activates sirtuins, we know that it activates AMPK, and it activates FOXO. And all those things will basically activate your body's ability to become younger, if you will. DNA repair, autophagy, telomere lengthening, all those kinds of things occur when you stress the body in that particular fashion with a fast.
Is it a cumulative value? So when you're saying 3 months in a row, am I just doing the same thing 3 times, or is it getting better each time?
getting better each time is what they would show. And then from there, they recommend that you do it once a quarter. There are people that do it more frequently than that, but it's interesting. There are groups of people that really benefit from this too. Like it's being used in cancer patients. And it actually, because the stem cells are boosted, it'll actually boost your bone marrow stem cells, which can be a real issue for people that have depleted bone marrows, and particularly cancer patients that are undergoing chemotherapy. We had dinner the other night, a friend of a friend going through stage 4 colon cancer chemotherapy is doing the fast mimicking diet leading up to the chemotherapy, and he's having no drop in his white blood cell counts with the chemo. And his oncologists are amazed because he's boosting stem cell activity in the bone marrow. So there's lots of benefits that happen. The brain is improved, right? It's kind of like exercise, right? Your body gets stronger when it's stressed. When you sit around all day, when you sit around and you're fat and happy and eating all day and watching TV, you just get weaker and weaker and more sluggish. When you stress yourself, either with exercise, lack of calories, whatever it is, that's how the body responds to that to get stronger. So this is just a sophisticated way that most people haven't really entertained. Everybody's talked about fasting for eons, right? It's been part of every religious tradition for years, centuries. But in modern society, it's you need 3 meals. Breakfast is the most important meal of the day. You need to eat all the time. And so we're constantly overfed. This is kind of a systematic way to go reset the clock on a bunch of that. And one of the interesting things that happens for people is it resets their appetite. So we have a lot of people that are trying to lose weight and they say, but I have trouble with portion control. They do a 5-day fast mimicking diet and all of a sudden they come back and it's like, I'm just not that hungry. I eat smaller portions, I'm fine. And it sort of resets the whole metabolic situation. Or people are losing weight, they hit a plateau, their metabolism is settled in, and they can reset the metabolism by doing a fast mimicking diet to help them go, the next stage. So
if I can chime in, there's actually a really cool study in mice that came out not long ago. And the mice were exposed to a very high level of ionizing radiation, far higher than what you get for cancer patients. And all the mice in the control group died, and a large number of the mice in the fasting group survived, right? Which was a very interesting finding. Now, we know that a lot of forms of hormesis can protect against these damages, such as radiation, whether it be fasting, exercise, hydrogen, which is likely a form of hormesis. To touch on the changing your appetite and diet, I can attest for that 100%. I find it one of the biggest benefits. It's why I often recommend time restricted eating for people as a start. I'm not sold on the benefits of time restricted eating other than psychological. But then when you start moving to fasting, I know my appetite has changed. My cravings have changed. My portion control has changed. Everything has changed for the better from starting a fasting protocol. And, I know I respond better to a water fast, but I know a lot of people respond better to, an FMD, fasting mimicking diet. And what's really interesting to me, in research coming out is identifying maybe even genetic responders to different forms of hormesis. People are going to have different therapeutic levels. There's going to be a J or reverse J curve for all of these forms of hormesis. So doses are going to be ideal at different levels for different people and different protocols. And I think it's really cool how fast we're coming along. I
think it's amazing. I'd like to do 2 things. One, hear a little bit more about the mouse study in terms of what they hypothesized enabled them to survive. And then second, let's talk about hydrogen as a form of hormesis.
Sure. I want to add one other thing about when we leave the fast here. When you start looking at these portions, it becomes even more obvious how overfed we are.
Right.
And I was eating out over the weekend, and you walk into a typical restaurant now and order an entree at a restaurant, you've got 2 people's dinner there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Easily. I mean, you eat a typical entree, it's 2 people.
Right.
And we're overfed. I really think that's an issue.
That's right.
I think, one of my biggest hobbies is cooking and creative cooking. And sometimes, I'll make my own, pasta sauce, and it might take me 6 hours because I enjoy doing it and I do everything from scratch and I want to do it right. I think a big problem with our diets is we're loading everything with so many extra calories, and it's actually destroying taste profiles also. We go back to a lot of types of foods, and more isn't better. You add more tastes, you add more conflicting tastes, and that doesn't taste better, but we're so accustomed to it. So we load everything with high fat and high sugar and mix these flavor profiles, and all of a sudden we've tripled the calorie, on this meal by adding it, and it really doesn't taste better. We get accustomed to it and we crave it
until you eat real food, and until you really eat some really fresh herbs and you get that stuff going, and then you go back. I went to a restaurant last night that we used to love, and it was like, I can't believe how terrible this food is, because you get used to eating like really great stuff. It's amazing.
Absolutely. Even last night, I brought, I'm fasting right now. I brought pizza for my common law, partner, and her training partners are training for an Ironman right now. And I just asked her, I'm like, can I order from like one of the chains? Because I don't even crave it anymore. It's too greasy. Right. I don't like it. And she said, yeah, that's fine. I didn't even want to order from the place I get, which everything is made from scratch. It's a Neapolitan, pizza place. So I usually get just like a margarita or some kind of veggie pizza. And I just didn't want that temptation. But even the smell of like the greasy,
right,
pizza, it just set me off. So even in a fast, it wasn't driving me crazy, picking it up and driving them, because it just wasn't appetizing.
Right. One of my colleagues here just returned from China for a week. And he's over there in business, and he had to go to a lot of elaborate dinners, and basically said he couldn't eat anything. So he was essentially on about a 7-day fast.
Interesting. Yeah.
He said he landed in LAX yesterday. He said he had a few minutes. He ran off the plane. He said he ordered a pizza and chicken wings as soon as he got on the ground. And he said in 15 minutes he was throwing up.
Yeah, there you go.
Because he overate after being basically fasted for a week's time.
Yeah. Yeah, you can easily do that. Another interesting thing about fasting too, Alex, speaking about radiation, is that you can actually sensitize cancer cells to radiation and chemotherapy by fasting. You're getting the stem cells that will boost your bone marrow, all right, so you withstand better. But at the same time, cancer cells are very sugar dependent typically. And so when you go into these fast mimicking diets or fasting diets, and then you go get your radiation, and then you go get your chemo, those cells are much more vulnerable. And so the kill rates on the cancer cells go up dramatically, which is pretty interesting. So lots of benefits.
Well, let's jump into some talks about hydrogen. Hydrogen is, I know you do, and I'm going to ask Dr. Gladden a question here, and I don't know the answer to this. If you had every supplement, every nutrient available to you taken away, and you were told, okay, Dr. Gladden, you can have one bottle of pills or one item, would hydrogen be on the top of that list?
Is this non-prescription we're talking about?
Non-prescription.
Okay. I would say hydrogen would be on the top of my list. Yes, it would be. It's the number one, I think. Pretty much everybody we talk to, we put on hydrogen. In fact, I can't think of anybody we don't. But yeah, I think it's that foundational, quite honestly.
So, Alex, bring our audience up to speed in case they haven't heard you last time. What is hydrogen? How do we make it? What is happening? Why do we want to use this?
Sure. So, and just to clarify, I think you guys had a researcher, Tyler LeBaron, on.
Yes.
So, hydrogen, basically, it's just molecular hydrogen. So, it's two hydrogen atoms, bonded together. It's a neutral gas. It's nonpolar, non-reactive. We believed it was completely inert for a very, very long time. And it was a seminal article in Nature Medicine in 2007. So Nature Medicine is Nature, Science are the two highest impact factor journals in the scientific community. So when something's published in Nature, it gets a lot of attention. And they found that hydrogen was a selective free radical scavenger. In that study, it only basically reduced the hydroxyl radical, which is the most damaging radical. And of course, we've been learning over the last 10, 20 years more about the importance in redox. A lot of these reactive oxidative species are good for us, and we need a balance between oxidation and reduction. So it was quite a profound paper that got published. Since then, in the last 12 years, there's over 1,200 publications on molecular hydrogen therapy, whether it be dissolved in water, saline, or inhalation of hydrogen gas. There's over 70 human clinical trials that are published now, and it's showing a benefit in 170 models across every organ in the mammalian body. And what is really cool for moving forward in the future is currently there are more human clinical trials that are either underway, being written, in press, or registered and recruiting than the ones published. So the research is expanding quite quickly. In the past, it was mostly being done throughout Asia with a bit of clinical research in Europe, but there's a lot of teams in North America that are taking notice, and some big universities. I mean, Harvard and Johns Hopkins just did a porcine study, on hearts that they published earlier this year.
Now, Dr. Gladden, we have our own study of sorts coming up on hydrogen.
Yes, we do. We're looking into the molecular mechanisms of it in a kind of a interesting way, trying to go, what we're really trying to do is kind of go fast and furious into the underlying mechanisms without having to go into animal models or human models. So we're using an in silico system that enables us to kind of mathematically, if you will, model a cell and then look at the effects of molecular hydrogen inside that cell, looking in particular buckets for that. And we can expand that research. It's nice because we can iterate it fairly quickly, and we don't have to go through the life cycles of an animal and that sort of thing. So we'll recruit a lot of people. It's going to give us some really fascinating direction, I think, on how best to utilize hydrogen and potentially going forward, other combinations and uses that may be potentially efficacious. So,
how does hydrogen, when we think about, and again, I'm asking these questions to both of you, when we're thinking about this show, which is Living Beyond 120, because I know hydrogen does a lot of things. To start with, how does hydrogen play into the longevity question or the longevity issue?
Basically, the long and the short is it seemed to mitigate some of the biggest damages and contributors to aging. Now, it's shown to regulate our redox status, to deal with oxidative stress. It's shown to regulate production of pro-inflammatory cytokines, or these tiny little signaling proteins that lead to excess inflammation. So hydrogen isn't an anti-inflammatory. It regulates our inflammatory response. Inflammation is a good thing. Our bodies need it. It's bad when it's out of homeostatic function, right? On top of this, we just had a paper using the tablets that came out. It was on non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And not only did it reduce liver fat and it dropped AST by like 10%, but a secondary abstract got published in 28 days. It increased insulin sensitivity by 11%.
Now, this is a big deal. I want to stop there for a minute, because one, you're talking about fatty liver, which is becoming epidemic here in the U.S.
3 Americans have it.
And you're talking type 2 diabetes also.
Well, I don't want to go into diabetes per se, because
or insulin resistance.
Insulin resistance. I mean, they weren't diabetic. They likely would have had metabolic syndrome also, like pre-diabetes. Our 4th clinical trial, so our first 2 are on exercise performance on the tablets. Our 4th is on metabolic syndrome. So that's done. I've seen the data. It's being submitted probably in the next week. Actually, the abstracts were already submitted to 2 conferences. The authors are presenting at a conference in Japan and one in China at the end of the month here in August. So the data is quite incredible. It was 60 participant, 6-month, double-blind, placebo-controlled. Placebos we always provide are an effervescent magnesium supplement to account for the magnesium intake and to make sure that it's very well placebo controlled. And I can't really give too many numbers because it hasn't been through peer review yet, but it's very favorable. I mean, it in virtually every parameter of metabolic disease or metabolic syndrome, it appeared to reverse the markers and outcomes, and in some very important ones also.
Now, in the case of the NASH, or the non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, was it actually reducing fat in the liver, or was it changing the liver's function? What were you seeing?
It reduced fat, and it lowered the one marker AST quite significantly. So it's very favorable. I mean, there's other articles on hydrogen. I think other either sports performance or metabolic and mitochondrial functions is where we have the best evidence right now of hydrogen, and it's showing a real dose-dependent response also. I'm actually writing an article on this with a professor friend of mine. So just to clarify for the audience, I'm not a research scientist. I'm an inventor, but I've been so obsessed with the research for a long time, and I've been churning out a lot of articles. And some of the professors who are researching hydrogen have invited me to write articles with them, with my understanding. I've probably read 800 or 900 of the 1,200 studies on hydrogen. I've been thinking about it for years and years and years. So, we've seen hydrogen, it's improved body composition, it's improved outcomes in a couple trials of metabolic syndrome, one in type 2 diabetes in humans, others in various, mitochondrial impairments, metabolic impairments, lots of rodent data also showing the same thing. And with these two human studies that we have in the tablets now on the NAFLD and the metabolic syndrome coming out, it's painting a pretty clear picture. We have 2 replication studies that are being finalized also that are looking to replicate the targets from both NAFLD and metabolic syndrome. So it's always important to continue the research, to get bigger studies, look for more controls, different targets. Likewise, there's other teams that are also, exploring the mechanisms of action, because as it stands, we have a lot of good ideas. We know what hydrogen does. We know how it works in a lot of ways, but we still don't know the why. Why does it do this?
We're talking about a lot of sort of disease states, but I know you touched on this for a second, but it's fantastic for athletic performance enhancement as well.
Yes.
Brain clarity and brain function and things like that. So for people that are looking to optimize, we think it's a fantastic tool, as well as for people that are working against, NASH or whatever else. So
actually, one of the leading theories on how hydrogen works, is that it works via hormesis as sort of an exercise mimetic. I think also it kind of works as a caloric restriction mimetic. It's activating a lot of the same pathways. But there was a really cool rodent study done out of Brazil, and they were consuming hydrogen as they were working out and getting real-time measurements. And we know exercise works, for say our redox, and exercise is damage. It actually increases oxidative stress during exercise, and it creates a rebound effect where it lowers oxidative stress post-exercise. And the same thing actually happens. That's how exercise is anti-inflammatory, is actually by releasing interleukin-6 out of skeletal tissue in its myokine role, right, in small amounts, which triggers.
For the audience, interleukin-6 is inflammatory, so while it's releasing that, then it enables the body to respond back.
Exactly. So exercise is a pro-inflammatory, leading to a stronger anti-inflammatory response. It does the same thing with redox. So actually, an interesting study with hydrogen in rats. Hydrogen actually didn't blunt the oxidative stress as they were working. It actually increased oxidative stress during exercise, but then it rebounded faster, right? So the protective response happened quicker than it does with exercise alone. So not only did hydrogen work like exercise for regulating our redox status, but it potentiated the benefits of exercise.
We've had athletes, basically Ironmen, take 3 hours off their personal records using nothing but hydrogen in addition to their normal routine. It's like pulling out the old battery and putting in the new. Because, why do you get fatigued? You get fatigued because of all that oxidative stress that goes on when, you're making ATP constantly hour on end. And so you put in the hydrogen, or your brain gets tired in the afternoon, you've been thinking all day. You put in the hydrogen, it's like it clears out the excess oxidative stress. And the next thing you know, it's like you're refreshed again.
Yeah. So what about, and I'll ask both of this, whoever wants to answer it, what would be the connection then between hydrogen and using hydrogen with, let's say, an infrared sauna or near infrared sauna, or using hydrogen with an ozone sauna?
Well, there's good, some good studies on infrared saunas. It's another form of hormesis. My musings on the subject, and we need better evidence, but my musings is hydrogen seems to have this rescue effect and act as a protectant. And we're seeing some data where it's potentiating exercise, it's potentiating caloric restriction, fasting, these types of things. Anecdotally, a lot of people are loving hydrogen during fasts. It's picking them up, it's helping their fast tremendously.
You're using it when you do your water fast? You're still using hydrogen?
Yeah. I actually double my hydrogen dose during my water fast. Right?
Are you drinking hydrogen, Mark, during your fast mimicking diet?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that I kept.
Yeah.
I did drop all the vitamins, but I kept the hydrogen.
Yeah.
And I kept that in Neo 40.
There you go.
So with a lot of these forms of hormesis, it's tighter, J curves and reverse J curves where it goes from optimal benefit to damage, right? Even with exercise. I mean, you exercise an hour or two a day and you're very healthy. You don't exercise at all, you're sedentary, you're unhealthy. But people who train 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day, high intensity, they're in a disease state. They have increased all-cause mortality, shorter lifespans. It's damage to your body, right?
Heart failure, atrial fibrillation, you name it. It's a U-shaped curve, right? Too little is bad. You get the right amount, it's perfect. You get too much. And you've got to actually understand who you are as an individual based on your genetic ability to actually manage oxidative stress also.
Yeah, so how do we get to the right amount, guys? How do we find out what the right amount of exercise is? Because I know this isn't following where we're at, but that is, I think, a fascinating question for people.
Well, the good thing about exercise is it seems to have, quite a long flat period on top. So it's going to be dependent how healthy you are, how in shape you are, how much training you have on you. But I'd say now, until we have better data, to follow your body. If you're waking up tired, if you're not sleeping well, you're probably exercising too much, right?
Yeah. You can look at your strain scores, your heart rate variability, and I think, like we do with the Whoop or the Oura Ring, I think gives you pretty good feedback. I think the other piece that
I wear my Oura Ring.
There you go. We're wearing the Whoops, right? So, but if you understand your genetics of how well you can manage oxidative stress, and I won't rattle them off because they're just terms, but they're genetic tests that you can get done, and then you can actually see, hey, you know what? I'm like, for me, example, I'm actually not built to be an Ironman. And I love to exercise, and I'm, pretty decent at a lot of things I do, but I'm really not built to be an Ironman. I would actually hurt myself if I went down that path. So just because you have an aspiration doesn't mean you have the genetics to back it up. And I think it's important for people to look at their genetics and see what they're built for and optimize their exercise around that. And then use hydrogen to help them, and then use the recovery scores that you can get from Oura or Whoop and dial it in that way. I think that's the same way to go about it.
And it's the same thing. I mean, I just wrote a series on hormesis. It was about 25,000 words with 500 citations. And myself, for example, I don't really get cold. I can be outside in minus 30 in a t-shirt and it doesn't bug me too much. I can go into a, cryo sauna, I think it's like minus 180 or something. And when I used to do it, the location shut down, but the guy who ran it said I'm the only person of his customers that would hold a conversation, and I wasn't shivering. Cold just didn't really get to me, but I get heat stroke very easily.
Both of those are genetically determined. Actually.
Exactly. And so, I mean, I don't think we can, prescribe for heat therapy, for cold therapy, for exercise, a one size fits all. It's going to be dependent on each person. And, my most enjoyable form of hormesis is alcohol, ethanol. I love red wine. But if I have, say, 20 ounces of red wine on most days, I'm blowing a 0.01 at most, right? It doesn't affect me. Whereas friends of mine will drink that same amount and they're blowing a 0.1, right? So, our detox enzymes are going to be different person to person, and the stress of alcohol is going to be different person to person.
So you metabolize alcohol quickly.
Yeah, I do, quite quickly, which, leads to increased damage. When I do get drunk, I mean, it's bad news. I might be 60 ounces of vodka, in, right? And,
wow.
Yeah, it's
that sounds painful to me.
Yeah, it's really bad news.
That's impressive, actually.
Well, that's why I don't drink.
I'd prefer not to, metabolize alcohol like that too, because when I go over that threshold from, if I have 2 glasses of red wine, I'm fine. I'm not even intoxicated. I have no craving for more. I can control it. But say I'm at an event and drinking vodka and I'm having drinks with people, all of a sudden I go over, that limit, and then I just keep drinking, and the night doesn't go well. And of course, the damage from one night of excess can maybe cancel out, who knows, 30 nights.
You have to fast every week.
So would hydrogen help with someone recovering with a hangover or overindulging?
So there's one study out of Japan in rodents where it did show an increase in the detox enzymes. Anecdotally, everyone seems to agree that hydrogen greatly helps with hangovers. I know for myself, it clears my head and it brings me a lot of energy. But it doesn't get rid of gut rot. If you drank a lot and ate a lot, your stomach is still damaged, but hydrogen definitely perks you up. It clears the headache, boosts in energy. In talking with Tyler LeBaron, I asked him why there isn't more studies on it, and he said he asked that to Professor Oda, who published that first paper in Nature Med. Professor Oda joked and he said, "Tyler, everyone in Japan already knows hydrogen helps with hangovers. Plus, the government doesn't want to fund a study, on helping with hangovers, right?" I know, not even telling people because we were there, for athletic performance, but we were just at the NHL, All-Star Awards, giving out hydrogen water to, the players nominated. And in this gifting suite, there was a vodka sponsor, and they were just passing full glasses of vodka around the room to everyone. And then there was big parties and everything. And I passed around hydrogen waters to everyone in the room the next morning when people were really struggling to get their days going. And everyone was like, what was in that? I feel 100 times better. So
yeah,
interesting.
Anecdotal. We need better evidence, but it's hard to get IRB to get people super intoxicated.
Well, even some intoxication, you could probably get an IRB for that, I suppose, a bit. But yeah, and I think glutathione gets depleted quickly too in the detox process. So if you can boost glutathione for people, hydrogen, the combination of those two, I think.
Will hydrogen boost glutathione?
Yeah. So it hydrogen activates our NRF2 pathway, and it regulates our endogenous production of antioxidants like glutathione, catalase, superoxide dismutase. So that's how hydrogen works, because it also regulates and is shown to regulate nitric oxide and H2O2, some beneficial oxidative stresses that we have in our body. And that's what we're learning, that it's one of the reasons why antioxidant therapy hasn't always worked. It didn't work how we wanted it to. In some cases, it actually does damage, is because it's this delicate balance between oxidation and reduction is what we need. And that's what hydrogen does. It's shown to come and have this rescuing effect and promote balance. And I think
it's more of an adaptogen than an actual agent. Like you take an antioxidant, it does one thing, right? But if you take an adaptogen, it actually what's low is raised and what's high is lowered, and it kind of brings things into balance. And I think hydrogen works that way.
Absolutely. I mean, even for things like autophagy, there's 4 studies with hydrogen on autophagy right now, and in 3, it activated autophagy for a beneficial result, and in 1, it deactivated autophagy, which was needed in that model. So hydrogen has shown to do a lot of things. It can be pro-inflammatory or anti-inflammatory because it's regulating our inflammatory response. Same thing, with our redox. It can be an antioxidant or it can, be a pro-oxidant. And it's having this effect, and it seems to work better with more damage. And that's why it's really interesting to me, along with other forms of hormesis like fasting, caloric restriction, exercise, alcohol, exposure, heat exposure, because hydrogen is, if you overdo it, hydrogen is coming to this rescuing effect so that they're still beneficial. And we don't have an upper limit on where hydrogen is bad. So far in the clinical research, there is no U, there is no J, right? Hydrogen, the more we're giving, it's just showing more and more results. And this makes a lot of sense because we know the safety levels of hydrogen. In deep sea diving, they'll use 1,000 times the dose of hydrogen that we can deliver for this mixed gas diving, and it takes more hydrogen to create narcosis than nitrogen, which we're 78% of what we breathe all day long.
So is there a point of diminishing returns?
Maybe, but we haven't gotten there yet.
Wow.
There probably is. I mean, there has to be, right? It's a biological organism.
Exactly. There's going to have to be.
Right.
I'm of the opinion too. I'm a big fan, and I recommend to everyone to switch up dosing every 6 months. If you do the same exercise every day for your entire life, it's no longer exercise. And anecdotally, I've noted that every time I switch up my dosing with hydrogen, whether it's my dose or the time I take it, right, in the day, I'll do, a 4 or 5 day washout and then switch the time of day I take hydrogen and the dose I take it. And every time I do that, I get the first week or so, I get an extra rush of energy. I feel better. I mean, it could be psychological, it could be placebo, but everyone I've recommended that does that has reported, hey, my knee was stiffening up a little bit again, and when I switched it, my knee loosened back up. I'm getting a lot of these anecdotes, hundreds and hundreds of them. It could be thousands or even more, from the people I've told who then tell other people. But it makes a lot of sense when we compare it to other forms of hormesis, why you'd want to switch your blood.
So to answer your question, Mark, would you take hydrogen with an ozone sauna or a sauna? The answer is yeah. I actually do. If I take an ozone sauna, I drink some hydrogen because, it's sort of, I think of it as an adaptogen. It'll be knocking out the really bad free radicals that get formed that could be damaging to me, but then it's allowing the ozone to do what it needs to do, right, to kind of stimulate NAD production and all that sort of thing. So
you would use it right before the sauna?
To Alex's point, I've mixed it up. I've taken it an hour before, I've taken it right before, I've taken it an hour afterwards, whatever it is. But it's just I don't have a problem having it in the mix of that. So
now Alex brought up nitric oxide and hydrogen. What is the connection there?
Well, hydrogen has a few, rodent and in vitro data where it's shown to, regulate nitric oxide. There's one team that reported some interesting data they saw, and I'm by no means an expert on nitric oxide, so I could be, flipping this around, but I believe it was in otherwise healthy people that it significantly raised breath nitric oxide levels, but in asthmatics it lowered.
So, Dr. Gladden, would that mean that, and this is not a treatment or a cure, but does that mean that hydrogen would be a tool in the toolbox for somebody working on, let's say, ED?
the more that I learn about hydrogen, the more that we see the effects of it, the more we start to understand it. And we're going to understand more from the research, Mark, that you and I are doing with the in silico stuff as well on the mechanisms, because I want to put it into some models where the cell is exposed to heat, the cell is exposed to exercise, the cell is exposed to, whatever else. But I think the more I understand hydrogen, I think it's just foundational, quite honestly, to everything that you want to do. So no matter what it is, treat cancer or have better, results from diabetes or exercise. It just seems to be one of those foundational things. I don't think it's because of an adaptogenic thought process that I have around it. I just feel like it helps balance out what needs to be balanced in virtually all these situations.
Now, how about hydrogen and dieting? I mean, 75% of the country's overweight, and I think about a third of the country's on a diet on any given day. I'm in that third, by the way. How does hydrogen play into dieting? And I'm going to say not only dieting in general, but then how does it play into, let's say, keto dieting, which is becoming very popular?
Well, yeah, I mean, dieting is different than fasting, right? So I'm a huge advocate of actually understanding your genetics and your gut biome and your food sensitivities. At that point, understanding what kind of diet you need and actually even understanding genetically what your issues are, right? So, for example, Alex is never cold, even in 30 degrees or in a cryo chamber, and that's because his uncoupling proteins, he's got the best configuration there. So he basically burns a lot of fat to make heat. It's one of the reasons that his resting metabolic rate is high. But not everybody has those genetics, and if you don't, then you're going to have to do more physical exercise to burn calories and things like that. So until you understand who you are, it's really hard to give these blanket statements. I don't think that hydrogen is a diet pill. I don't think it makes you lose weight. I haven't seen that per se. I think it does enhance your ability to do exercise, and it makes your brain better and you have more energy. So you may want to do more exercise or make better decisions. But I don't personally, and Alex, you may disagree or agree, but I don't see it as a diet pill per se, but I see it sort of function at this basal level across everything else you're doing. And if you're doing fasting, I think it's interesting that maybe it is potentiating the good effects of the fast, which is different than dieting. So, but I think it's really important to get your diet dialed into who you are, plant-based, whatever. Everything's keto these days, but quite honestly, we're a biological system. We go in and out of ketosis. That's our natural biorhythm. I think trying to stay ketotic all the time, unless you're trying to beat cancer or something, is probably not what we need to be doing.
I think ketosis is probably a form of hormesis. I think you want to go into it intermittently. We've seen some rodent data where the mice, have these anti-tumor properties. They're healthier in all parameters, on a high-fat, low-carb, ketogenic diet. But then at month 6, it reverses. And they're forming more tumors more aggressively. They're unhealthy. Right. So I tend to agree. And I know a lot of the big proponents of keto are starting to say that too. That always being in ketosis all the time probably isn't the best idea. You want to do it off and on. And I'd agree with that completely. As for a weight loss pill, I wouldn't call it a weight loss pill. There are some studies showing weight loss. I think it has more to do with the rescue effect. If it starts improving other markers, giving you more energy, you feel better, you're going to be moving more and you're going to start losing weight, right? Because you're more active and you're feeling better and everything else is going on. I know in this new study we have coming out, there was pretty significant weight loss. But again, these were people, with metabolic syndrome, right? So in a healthy person who's metabolically healthy and just overweight, I don't think you're going to lose a lot of weight. But if you're in a state where you're compromised, perhaps it could help you indirectly by making you feel better and giving you more energy to do a lot. And, maybe even by improving mood, and all these things. I've been slowly believing that deteriorating health, gaining weight, lower activity, justification, it is as much a mental health issue as it is a physical issue. People justify, why they're not able to eat better, why they're not able to work out. The worse they eat, the less they work out, the less energy they have to do either, the more stressed they get, the more depressed they get, and they justify more and more and more. If hydrogen can be a small win in helping to turn this around, they may gain momentum and do other things. So these studies where we're seeing weight loss could be hydrogen acting as one of the first small wins to turn around other habits, and that's very hard to control.
Yeah, it's a win, but it's not the whole battle, that's for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah. So one of the things that we've thought about with hydrogen too, Alex, is whether or not hydrogen plays a role in better sleep. I think a lot of us feel sort of energized when we take hydrogen. So whether or not to take it before bed, take it in the middle of the night if you wake up, take it in the morning. I don't know. What are your thoughts about hydrogen and sleep quality? So
I personally find when I take it right before bed, I'm wired with energy, but I have a really hard time sleeping. I've kind of detailed it in a lot of writing. If I don't make a huge effort, wear my Oura Ring, track it, my sleep is below 5 hours a night on average. I'll get some nights 2-3 hours. I wake up, my mind is racing. I just start working in the middle of the night type thing, or work until 3 a.m, then wake up at 6 a.m. to start working again. So I don't take hydrogen before sleep, but I've definitely noted that when I take it in the morning, I sleep better. It is one of the biggest anecdotes we hear on hydrogen improving sleep function. There's one rodent study on sleep apnea where it helped that model quite a bit, reducing side effects. Actually, I can't go into a lot of details, but there's 2 major North American universities that are starting studies in rodents, one on sleep apnea and one on homeostatic sleep function, right? They're going to give hydrogen water from the tablets to chronically sleep deprived mice and basically measure their sleep quality.
So Alex, have you personally tried using something like a chili pad for sleeping?
I have, and even in the wintertime, I run an air conditioner.
That's what I was wondering, because I figured that would be something to be great for you.
Yeah. I run AC. My common law girlfriend wraps herself in like 4 blankets, and I'll run the AC right beside me in the middle of the wintertime. I need it to be cold to sleep. If it's not, I cannot sleep. I just sweat.
Have you tried the chili pad itself?
I haven't.
Could be a good option for you because you can lower it down to 55 degrees and you're laying right on it, right? So now it's sucking heat out of your body.
So I will tell you, I will sweat at night a lot. Since I got the chili pad, I've never had a night sweat.
Interesting.
I mean, it's just, they're gone. Completely eliminated. So Alex, with everything that obviously all your work with hydrogen and everything what would be the 3 things that you think would be the most important thoughts or the most important things you could share to our audience for people to be able to live a healthy and long life beyond 120?
I think right now our best strategies, of course, as science advances, we're going to have a lot new strategies that could extend that lifespan even further and further and further. But for now, I think various forms of hormesis, and healthy diet is going to be our best bet to extend our health span, which is going to extend our lifespan to the upper limits. I really like hydrogen in this because it's shown to mitigate the effects of the big few, like our redox, our inflammatory response, our insulin sensitivity. Also, I wrote a little article. I do believe it inhibits advanced glycation end product cross-linking. And there was one study with the hydrogen-rich medium where it did prevent ages from forming. So hydrogen has a lot of cool features in this regard. But I think or more importantly, its benefit in working with the other forms of hormesis, like exercise, like, alcohol, like fasting, like cold exposure, heat exposure, to not just potentiate their benefits, but mitigate the deleterious effects if you overdo it, right? Because a lot of people get addicted to these health protocols, and they do them to the point of damage.
They do them to the point of damage for sure. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Interesting. So sometimes we're saying that people can get an addiction to healthy living.
That's right.
100%. Yeah. Right. And I think a lot of what happens with eating disorders is the same thing on opposite sides of the spectrum. Unhealthy eating or healthy living becomes the same disorders, because what ends up happening is, as we create a new norm, right? Even if that norm is super unhealthy or super healthy, we've redefined it as our normal, right? And so we're weighing that as normal. And say you're eating unhealthy every day, and it's very unhealthy. That's your normal. So when you eat, say, a salad for dinner, you think, why am I not getting results? I had a salad yesterday for dinner, right? Because you've weighed that singular decision so heavy because it's against your norm. On the flip side, when people get obsessed with, say, healthy living, healthy diet, their new norm is at this point, right? And so if they have one single cheat meal, now they've weighed that damage as far worse than it actually was, right? And now they try and overreact and respond to this. And it'll happen with exercise too. They'll think, oh, I only worked out an hour today, I was being lazy, right? And then they up it, and their new normal becomes training 3 times a day, and then they still have to do hard days on feeling good, and it becomes this addiction where you need to continue moving your own definition of what is extra effort, right, to fit with your new norm.
Right. No, and there are genetics actually that play into that too, because there are genetics that some people are much more prone based on their comp gene to be OCD, and they kind of obsess about this stuff and go forward with that. So some really interesting stuff there. But if somebody is out there hyper exercising, doing 3 spin classes a day, definitely be pounding the hydrogen to help protect yourself while you get the rest of it sorted out.
And get help for your addiction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dr. Gladden, what kind of empowering question or thought do you have for us at the end of this show?
Well, I guess it would be, why wouldn't you take hydrogen? I guess the only other question I would ask Alex is, do you have any recommendations on how to take hydrogen? Should it be on an empty stomach? Should you take it with other supplements, medications? What are your thoughts about that?
So I would say, anecdotally and with some hypothesis behind it, I'd say on an empty stomach, especially when you're starting. Maybe if you're training, I'd take it immediately before or during your exercise to regulate the damage during exercise. But for most people, I like doing it first thing in the morning on an empty stomach. That's, every time I wash out, I go back to first thing in the morning on an empty stomach after mingling it into a different protocol for a few months in between. Some of the early work, my partner, Dr. Holland, he's a PhD medicinal chemist, and I did organic chemist, is we were able to turn hydrogen, like infuse hydrogen into these viscous gels that had far higher concentrations than could be retained in water. And one thing on our pending patent on this is it's mostly polysaccharides that we were able to use to turn into these gels and foams rich in hydrogen. Now, probably the most effective one was pectin, right? Which is in a lot of, fruits and vegetables.
Yeah.
So my thought on that is, if you're drinking hydrogen water with, carbohydrates, right, with these various polysaccharides in them, those could be retaining the hydrogen you're consuming and making it more of a slow release, continuous dosing. Now, in the literature, we see that a high dose intermittent will work when the same dose over a continuous period does not, right? We want that high dose intermittent for, a shock effect. Of course, we're producing 8 to 10 liters of hydrogen a day, endogenously through bacterial breakdown of carbohydrates anyways. And that's a cool point also, that hydrogen has some early research right now of actually improving the microbiome, right? So that could, if hydrogen's improving your bacteria, then your bacteria is actually producing more hydrogen.
Right.
Exactly. So it could have a, synergistic effect there with that. So I definitely say, empty stomach, but again, we need more data. This is just a hunch on my part based on a leap from other data and anecdotally.
Yeah, my experience has been that I seem to get more of a benefit from it when I don't take it with food, if I take it on an empty stomach. And then I do take it with some supplements, but not every time. But that seems to work out fine too.
We have some interesting internal data on taking hydrogen with other molecules and have had to scale down by factors of 4 or 5 the amount we take the other supplements with because it works. And, there is, one of my customers that's done, blood tests and everything, and they've scaled down dosage on different vitamins and
so
everything.
It became a force multiplier for other molecules?
Again, we need really a lot more data.
Anecdotally, it sounds like that.
Anecdotally, yeah.
It appears to improve, a lot of other molecules. I just, had conversations with Professor Ostage out of Serbia, who's one of the first hydrogen human researchers, and his big area of expertise before was creatine. And then I had a conversation with Tyler LeBaron, who's also published an article on creatine, and is one of the leading hydrogen researchers. And they both believe there could be some, synergy between hydrogen and creatine. Hydrogen could replenish creatine. I'd have to ask more of them, that it's more into biochemistry. That's, I don't know it well enough to really comment.
That would make me think the bodybuilders will be getting into hydrogen pretty soon.
And some of them are.
Yeah.
There's some big ones who are already.
Sounds like it.
In one sense, we're all bodybuilders, right? It's just a question of whether or not you want to be able to flex your pecs, or you want to actually have your brain work well, or you want to be able to run, at your leisure, whatever you want to do. But
I have no interest in running at my leisure. Thank you. I hate running.
I feel you there. I've had 4 knee tears.
Well, you look like you're a pretty big guy. So you look like you're probably more on the weight training, more of a strength trainer.
Yeah, that's how my body defaults. It takes minimal weights for me to bulk up. I have to do a lot of things to really start cutting weight. I need a lot of calories in a day to maintain weight, but to go below 200 is arduous for me. I have to train. And there's kind of this cutoff point. My body used to always want to be at 200, and when I was competing, I'd get down to 175, 180, but everything was controlled. Every calorie was controlled. I was training 8 hours a day, and it was very, very difficult to stay that low. And as soon as I stopped, I believe when I stopped in martial arts and I went to start competing in CrossFit, it took me like 6 weeks to go from 175 to 200 pounds. And a lot of it was just muscle bulking back up almost immediately.
Now that's interesting. My 2 sports were bodybuilding and martial arts. And I'm going to guess and say that we have a very similar makeup in that regards. So that's it today for Living Beyond 120. If you like the show, make sure that you go and leave us a great review on iTunes, Stitcher, iHeart, wherever you're getting the show. So if you go to the show notes of Living Beyond 120 and look for the episode with Alex in it, you'll be able to find links to his website and to his social media. Alex, thanks for being with us on Living Beyond 120. Dr. Gladden, any last comments?
No, it was a great show, Alex. Thanks for being on with us.
No problem. Glad to be here.
Thanks.
Living Beyond 120 is a production of 2 and 2 Broadcasting in lovely Metro Detroit, Michigan, with sound editing by Johnny Waller, production assistance by Mandy Taylor, technical assistance by Matt Umbarger, and produced by me, Rob Taylor. For more information about the show or advertising inquiries, go to livingbeyond120.com. Thanks for listening.